The Shroud of Turin is one of the most researched and studied relics in church history, and profoundly impacts many who encounter its mystery.
As a person of faith, looking at it through the eyes of faith, I don't think it can help but touch your heart.
Something that we can look on not only to bolster our faith in those moments of weakness, but also to deepen our faith and our appreciation, our intimacy with Christ.
Join Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry as they examine the science of the shroud through the lens of faith.
Really interesting scientific information that we didn't know about, like the pollen from all the different regions of the world. As the shroud traveled around, it picked that up. Some of the mites, things like that was really interesting to me. I mean, this made you really want to believe it a lot more.
It's impressive. Like, humanly, I don't think like that is another level of love. It's not I'm gonna say, like, oh, I love you, I'll give you a chocolate. No. I'm giving you more than my life. I'm giving you my suffering.
Asking both experts and disciples, who do you say I am?
As far as who the man of the shroud is, as a person of faith and kind of reviewing the evidence there, it seems that a convincing argument can be made that it's Jesus of Nazareth.
Visit patchworkheart.org/shroud to learn more and get exclusive behind-the-scenes updates for your support.
Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278. The St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, in partnership with Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network, presents a podcast for families in crisis.
Hello, and welcome to a podcast from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. This is Ann DeSantis, Executive Director, joined by Mickey Kelly, our Board President. And this is a brand new series. This is our Families in Crisis series on the saints. It's called our 10 Saint series. And we're going to focus each month for this podcast on a saint that can intercede to you and your family for whatever adversities or traumas you're going through. And so first, I just want to welcome you, Mickey. Thanks for joining us again on this new series.
Hi, Ann. Thank you so much. I'm very excited about this series. I honestly think this has been long overdue for the foundation.
It is, because, the saints are our friends in heaven, and they're our friends here on earth too, because they're with us in spirit, cheering for us, praying for us, for whatever our needs, and also those pains of life. And so it's just great that we can focus each month on a saint. And so this is our first one. And so, of course, we want to focus on a Mercedarian saint, because we are a Mercedarian foundation. And we're going to focus on our own patron saint, which is St. Raymond Nonnatus. And St. Raymond Nonnatus is the patron saint of the falsely accused, of expectant mothers, for Christian family life, and also of the unborn. So we'll touch a little bit on each of those areas on this podcast. Mickey, I just wanted to find out from you if you had any words of wisdom that you know about St. Raymond Nonnatus. I am going to read his bio, so we will get the full information there, but wondered if you had any words of wisdom yourself on him.
Sure, Anne. Well, Anne, I think honestly, I think St. Raymond Nonnatus, I mean, it seemed like I feel like he is forgotten quite a bit on the Roman calendar. You know, when you look at the feast days, like of all the different saints in the Catholic Church, I seem like he's overlooked. But you hear about St. Benedict, you know, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Francis Xavier, Maria Grey, the list goes on. But I think one of the things that we have to understand is that, you know, St. Raymond Nonnatus, he's really in there, like he's really in that in crowd, so to speak, of all the great saints that have stood the test of time in our church. And of course, those of you who are curious, what is Nonnatus? That's actually his last name. No, it actually is Latin for not yet born. And as we're going to delve into his biography, you understand where did his last name come from. And I think another thing that, like you mentioned about he's a patron saint of this and that, I think it's a perfect time for it too when we look at moms who having like some fertility issues or issues with pregnancy. What a great saint to turn to during a pregnancy crisis. That, I mean, hey, let's look at him. And also we can also add the C-section, which Raymond Nonnatus was born out of that when his mother was very close to death, and miraculously he did survive. And I'm sure we'll discuss that a little more. But wow, this is something like everyone doesn't need to forget at all about. Like this is our job. Hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll be able to celebrate his feast day. And of course, you know, pray for his intercession more often.
Yeah, great point about the feast day, because this podcast is airing the last Thursday in August. So it's right around the time of his feast day. His feast day is August 31st. It's an important day for our foundation. I would ask all of you who are listening to please to pray for us in the work that we're doing, and pray for the Mercedarian friars who founded us in 2015, because, you know, without him, I mean, we wouldn't exist, because we are all about his charism, because that's our patron saint for this foundation. And again, I said he's the patron saint of the falsely accused, expectant mothers, Christian family life, and of the unborn. I'm going to go ahead and read his bio, and of course we can unpack and talk about this fully as we go on with this podcast. And it says here, this is from our Order of Mercy website, which is the Mercedarian Friars website. It says that traditional dates for the life of St. Raymond Nonnatus present him to us as a man of the 13th century. Born in Portal when his mother had already died, he came into the world by the dagger of the Viscount of Cardona, who took the child out of his mother's womb. Hence he acquired the nickname Nonnatus, or not born. Nevertheless, 20th century research shows us a friar named Raymond Nonnatus, a native son of Portal, who participated in the chapter in El Puig in 1324 and acted as a definite counselor of the provincial as the chapter of Ladira in 1335. In the latter chapter, he was appointed as a redeemer, and during a redemptive campaign in Algiers, his lips were padlocked and he suffered other tortures. He then also participated in the election of the Master General, Vincenz Riera. We discover in Raymond a life dedicated to redemptive service, enduring the same sufferings as the captive, and sustained by the strength of the Eucharist, filial devotion to the Mother of God and the Mother of mankind. According to tradition, the Pope decided to appoint him cardinal with the titular church of St. Eustace, a Roman basilica near the Pantheon, where his image is preserved. But while he was traveling to Avignon, he died at Cardona. Having no priest to administer the viaticum to him, he received it miraculously, administered by Jesus Christ himself. accompanied by angels dressed in the Mercedarian habit, as depicted in the iconography. From there, his remains were translated to the Hermitage of St. Nicholas in Portal. No doubt, he is the most popular Mercedarian saint, due especially to the activity of the Mercedarian missionaries to the nations who took him as their patron. For this reason, his image can be found scattered throughout the world with several elements that identify him, such as the palm of martyrdom with the triple crown and the monstrance with the Blessed Sacrament in his right hand. Because of the miraculous instance of his birth, he is the patron saint of expectant mothers who turn to him for protection at the moment of birth. In some countries, they pray to him also as the patron saint of pro-life institutions. The Order of Mercy includes in its ritual 2 elements linked to St. Raymond: the blessing of an expected mother and the blessing of water for the benefit of the sick. The decree recognizes him memorial cult was issued on November 5th, 1625. He was included in the Roman Martyrology on June 19, 1655, and St. Clement IX granted the extension of his office and mass to the whole church ad libidinem. Innocent XI raised his memorial to a second-class feast day, obligatory for the whole church, on March 10th, 1681. And again, his feast day is August 31st. So what a biography, Mickey, don't you think so?
Yes, for sure. Some people are expecting the biographies equivalent to some of the elite celebrities or other very well-known saints, but I just think that it's really, straight to the point about who is this saint. We covered the who, what, where, when in less than 10 minutes or, 5, give or take.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Honestly, I think it's really amazing too that you mentioned in the biography, and for those of you that are curious, I think if you've kind of missed it, at the time of St. Raymond, when he was doing his priestly ministry with the Mercedarians, you had the Moors that were, they were trying to assimilate the Spanish living in Spain at the time. And of course, one of the charisms at the time for the order was to free people that were in slave labor, slave trade, things like that. Hey, slavery did exist at the time, but most of us probably don't even realize it, that the Muslims were very hardcore when it came to it, especially when we had the periods of the different crusades, when they were trying to infiltrate, across the Mediterranean into Europe. And there's no question, like St. Raymond, like some of the martyrs at the time too, he was one of those people that he was one of the most faithful Mercedarians that would help free a family. In turn, he would be tortured. He even was a pulp away from death, which explains why he was going through all these different forms of torture. And he could have easily been a martyr, right then and there. But, like the saying goes, God had other plans for him.
Yeah, absolutely. God has other plans for him. And if you look at that, it's a piece of artwork, obviously, the picture of St. Raymond Nonnatus. And if you go to the website at orderofmercy.org to the saints page, I think it's under spirituality, you can see that picture there where his lips are padlocked. And if you can imagine what that was like. And although he wasn't martyred, boy, did he suffer. And so he does understand suffering. And I think that's why he's an appropriate saint for us with our foundation, because, Mickey, as you know, many people come to us who are those individuals and families who have gone through so much. And so we have a saint. Our patron saint is someone who really understands that suffering. And of course, he was all about the captives and giving his life over for the captives, just like St. Peter Nolasco, who was our founder, which we should have a podcast on him as well, or the founder of the Mercedarian religious order. And so he really did sustain a lot of suffering. He had a great devotion to Our Lady of Mercy. And I believe that we should have it also a podcast on Our Lady of Mercy. Obviously, she is a saint, our Blessed Mother, and especially this particular image of Our Lady, which is the Mercedarian Our Lady of Mercy, is that charism of Mary that's really who we're devoted to. And so if you go to that website that I just told you, theorderofmercy.org, there's a whole list of all the different Mercedarian saints, including the Our Lady of Mercy. And so I thought, Mickey, we could talk a little bit about the fact, which I think is very interesting, that St. Raymond Nonnatus is also the patron saint of the unborn, which of course you have done so much work yourself for the unborn. And we've seen some things going on in our world, of course, with with Roe versus Wade and everything that happened over the spring. And now we're in the summer here. I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words about that.
Yeah. So, and I think good point you made, especially considering that I mentioned earlier in this episode how Nonnatus is Latin for not yet born. And he's a great intercessor, for the unborn children, to plead to him for their lives to be spared. And honestly, I mean, I really hope many pro-lifers really start, praying for his intercession going forward, whether they are in a state where abortion's still happening or a state where the abortion industry is like going to become a distant memory for people on both sides of the issue, regardless of what state you're in, of course. Like, let's face it, abortion is bad, no matter what. And because like, it's this whole thing about my body, my choice you hear from the pro-abortion side. Well, guess what? It's not your body. It's basic biology. To a man and woman, they have sexual intercourse, and very likely the woman's gonna get pregnant. 23 times 2 chromosomes, which makes 46, come together and create life. And that woman will be carrying that baby through 9 months of pregnancy, and will give birth to a new child. And I always remember Dr. Monique Rivera would say time and time again when she would speak at rallies that it's not just one unborn child being murdered, but instead all the bloodlines that were to come after that child, whether it's like children of their own, and then of course their children, so on and so forth, are just wiped away. And it does sadden me that women use that excuse, and people say, well, you're a sexist, or things like that. We have to understand one thing, that there's a child in the mother's womb, and it's no longer her body. It's not part of her body. It's a human being. And it must be cherished. It must be nurtured. And believe me, the first and foremost, that child in the mother's womb is a child from God. And God made no mistake whatsoever.
Absolutely. Thank you for your thoughts there, because I know, and I think our listeners who listen to our podcast more than once, they know that you yourself have done so much for the pro-life effort. So I just want to thank you, and thank you that you and I have also been able to do some things together with the foundation to promote that culture of life. And so there's no doubt that St. Raymond Nonnatus is a pro-life saint. And so I think it's a beautiful thing that we can discuss his life, because, he truly was a saint from conception all the way through till natural death. And I'm just going to reiterate again something I said when I read about his life. It says that we discover in Raymond a life dedicated to redemptive service, enduring the same sufferings as the captives, and sustained by the strength of the Eucharist. filial devotion to the Mother of God and the Mother of mankind. I just want to back up a little bit. That redemptive service is really also what our founders are all about, because the Mercedarian religious order is my life for your freedom. That's their slogan. And honestly, that's partly what we do too, because we are a branch of them. And we are in this mission for the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for people like you who are those individuals and families who are in crisis. I would also like to make a shout out to people who have been to recent events for our foundation, because we just came off of, when we're taping this podcast, a Families in Crisis retreat we did at the National Shrine of St. Rita in July of 2022, where Mickey and I were joined by a couple Augustinian priests and about 20 people who came with all kinds of heavy things on their hearts. And I believe that when they left that day, that the problems might have still been there, but they certainly received the consolation of us and of Christ, and of course of our own patron saint, St. Raymond Nonnatus. On top of the fact that we were at a retreat honoring St. Rita of Cascia, there's no doubt we're going to do a podcast on her. So keep your eyes and ears open for that one too. I also would just like to mention the fact that when you look at the biography of St. Raymond Nonnatus, that it says that he's also the patron saint of the falsely accused. And I thought we could discuss that a little bit too, because the foundation has done a lot of work with the divorced, people who are affected by divorce and separation, whether they're the couples, the children of divorce, and sometimes even the relatives of divorce. I thought we could discuss that a little bit too, Mickey. I think that he's a great saint for those who are affected by divorce. Would you say so as well?
Well, absolutely. I mean, he does. I mean, let's face it. I'm sure. I mean, like also the Mercedarians, they want to help families in crisis. Especially the ones that we have worked with. Over the past few years since we've been working together, Anne. And there's no question in my mind that Saint Raymond Nonnatus, he is a pro-family saint.
Absolutely, he is. And I would just encourage all of you who are listening. Now, Saint Raymond Nonnatus is not always like a saint that everyone knows about. In fact, I can say that when Mickey and I do our events, when we go and have an exhibitor table for one of the Philadelphia or New Jersey based events or beyond, that there's always someone who comes up to us and says, "Who is Saint Raymond Nonnatus?" So I just encourage you to learn about him, because especially for you who are listening to a podcast for families in crisis, intercede to him. And knowing that his feast day is coming up for August 31st, which is coming up soon, he's the saint to intercede to. And on our own website, we do have a page there that you can read about our saints. But if you go to Order of Mercy, as I said, to the Our Spirituality page, and then just click on Our Saints, you can read his biography again, see the picture that I was talking about where it shows his lips being padlocked. And there was also that reflection in the biography that talks about the Eucharist and the devotion to Our Lady of Mercy. Maybe we can talk about that as well, Mickey, because, the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. And here we are in this 3-year period in our own archdiocese here in Philadelphia, where we're really focusing on the Eucharist is Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And when we're nourished by the Eucharist, it helps us to overcome some of those traumas and tragedies. Not to say that they're erased, but to say that we have the strength to go on. I thought you might have some reflections on that as well.
Yes, and honestly, the Eucharist is a powerful weapon that the Catholics have, and they're so blessed to have it, even especially as a sacrament, because Jesus said at the Last Supper that Jesus sacrificed himself for us. And we must do things in memory of him. I always think of a quote that J.R.R. Tolkien, who was the author of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, books, among other things, and a close friend to Gilbert Keith Chesterton and C.S. Lewis, three of the prolific writers of fantasy. And of course, apologetics. Well, two of them, of course. I don't know about Tolkien. I mean, I don't recall, but Tolkien was very well known for his, his fantasy work. So, but to get to really this, in that letter to his son, he labeled the Eucharist as a beacon of love that shines in the darkness. The Eucharist gives us a strength. Look at all the saints in the church. They had one thing, even though like some were martyrs, some were evangelists, some were in the clergy, some were laity, some were in religious life, whatever the case is, all of them had one thing in common, and that was their love for the Eucharist. Some were daily communicants. Some would spend hours on end before the Blessed Sacrament. I think at one point, St. John Paul II, and I'm sure he's going to be a subject for our podcast episode, he would spend hours, probably say half a day before the Blessed Sacrament. And he had a very close relationship with Jesus. There were times that St. Teresa of Calcutta, she would spend hours on end, before the Blessed Sacrament, wherever she went. Venerable Fulton J Sheen, he would pray, he made a daily commitment to pray 1 hour before the Blessed Sacrament. By the end of his life, he would pray for at least 3 hours because he was becoming a little more famous. The list goes on about many of these champions of the Eucharist, that I like to call them. And as you said, Anne, at this time of the taping of this podcast, many dioceses across the U.S., I don't want to be fact-checked on that one, but many are going through this Eucharistic revival. 7 out of 10 Catholics do not believe in the true presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. My advice to all of you, during the period in which, the priests would offer, like when they lift the host up and they do the Eucharistic prayer and everything, don't just look at the Eucharist and the the host and the chalice. My suggestion to you is, as the priest is reading those Eucharistic prayers, and there's 4 of them, there's like 4 variations of it, and they rotate time after time. Look at the crucifix. There you will understand why Jesus is present in that sacrament. Because he gave himself to you. In turn, we have to share him with others. Because as St. Paul reminds us in the letter to the Corinthians, we are ambassadors of Christ. And we must be willing to share his love, his mercy, and his message to others.
I love that piece about the ambassadors for Christ. And I think I even heard you say this on one of your own podcasts before on your YouTube channel at the Catholic Philadelphian. So thank you for bringing that up, because you know what? Every one of us are, aren't we? And the people who are listening to this, who are maybe families in crisis, maybe an individual who's going through some kind of adversity, a mom, a dad, a husband, a wife, someone. And so no matter where you are in your life, even if you're going through a suffering or a trauma, is that the Lord is here for you, especially in his body, blood, soul, and divinity. Whether it be that you spend time in prayer at a Eucharistic Adoration Chapel or anywhere you go, or when you receive the Eucharist, anytime you receive the Eucharist, whether it be on Sundays or if you do make it sometimes to daily Mass. So it's a beautiful thing to know that the Eucharist is available to us and that Christ loves us all that much that he makes himself available in his fullness. And I think our patron saint knew that very well, didn't he? Because the Eucharist was a very important part of his life and his ministry. And he is that patron saint, as I said, of all of those different things. But at the heart of all of those areas, whether it was for expectant mothers, for family life, for the unborn, or the falsely accused, is that the Eucharist was at the heart of all of that. And so I think there's so much to talk about when we talk about St. Raymond Nonnatus, but don't think we can end this podcast without mentioning that he is that patron saint for expectant mothers. And there's so many stories of how women who really wanted to have a child, who interceded to him and were able to conceive. And from the bio that I read from the Order of Mercy website, it says that no doubt he is the most popular Mercedarian saint, due especially to the activity of the Mercedarian missionaries to the nations who took him as their patron. For this reason, his image can be found scattered throughout the world with several elements that identify him, such as the palm of martyrdom with the triple crown and the monstrance with the Blessed Sacrament in his right hand. I'll just stop right there. But I mean, he truly is the most popular Mercedarian saint. And hence, when the two friars came together in 2015, after they went to the World Meeting of Families, and they said, what can we do to help those families? Because they felt the calling from the Holy Father. The Holy Father made a calling to everyone in Philadelphia to make outreach to families in crisis. And they took it very seriously. And they prayed about the name. What will the name of this foundation be? And so, knowing that he was the most popular Mercedarian saint and that he was the patron saint of family life, they decided to dedicate the foundation to him. I can't tell you all how honored I am to be a part of this foundation now since 2017. Now, I'm not the first executive director. There was another woman who worked before me for 6 months, and I thank her. Her name is Nancy. And of course, every leader in any foundation or organization makes their mark. And so we're grateful to Nancy for her initial leadership. And I'm certainly grateful that I was able to step in and continue to be with this foundation for almost 5 years now. And I'm especially grateful to the person I'm on this podcast with, Mickey Kelly, our president, our board president, who is such a joy to work with and has helped me and helped us, the foundation, the friars, our board, our 10-person board, to get the word out about who we are and what we do. And Mickey has done just that by working side by side with me on these podcasts and helping us to, as Mickey said a couple years ago when I first met him, to help us get on the map. Because, it's an important thing when you're working for a Catholic nonprofit that people find out about what you do and who you're trying to help. Because it does take work. It takes more than just one person to get the word out and pray about it and let other people know the special work that we're doing. So, Mickey, I just want to thank you for all that you do to help us and to minister to these people who come to us, families in crisis. And as I said, we just finished off that retreat that we just did. Mickey, I didn't know if you wanted to say a few words about that, because we are planning on doing another one.
Yes, and actually, one of the things I do want to encourage those of you who are listening, particularly if you've been affected by divorce, whether it's a spouse or if you're going through any kind of like marital crisis, please come to a retreat. And hopefully by the time you listen to this, we will have one set in stone somewhere in the greater Philadelphia area. And we do welcome people from Delaware and South Jersey, Central Jersey. If you can come, that would be, wonderful. And you have an opportunity to meet people, to discuss, and to hopefully, foster some new friendships. And in time, we're hoping to also have a retreat planned also at Malvern Retreat House, and it's actually one of the oldest retreat centers in the United States. if I'm not mistaken, maybe the first or second oldest, something like that. But come. I mean, honestly, one of the first steps you can take to heal from these marital crisis, whatever it is, the first step is to, go on retreat, because you do need to heal spiritually. It is one thing to heal physically, like if you were domestically hurt. Mentally, seeking, professional counseling, psychologist, counselor, whatever the case is. But what about your spiritual? What about that? What have you done to take the first steps in healing spiritually? And this foundation is here for you. Always do not be afraid to reach out to us.
Yes, thank you so much, Mickey. That's so true. And to reach out to us, all you need to do is just go to our website, nonnatus.org, and there's a contact form right there. I always have to mention on every podcast that you can get a free pastoral consultation with a Mercedarian friar. You can have as many as you need to discuss those issues, to find some healing and prayer. Please know that our Mercedarian friars and us as a foundation, that we pray for you. We pray for whatever those needs are. And as Mickey said, we're here for you. And I'm happy to work with him too, that we're really getting out there more with doing some in-person events. He did mention the Malvern Retreat House. What we did before was a rosary walk for the divorced in the past. And I would love to schedule another one of those coming up really soon. So keep an eye on the website on the programs and events page. Also make sure that you subscribe to our mailing list, because we do email blasts that go out to everyone who subscribes, letting them know all the activities and the things that are happening with this foundation. So as I said in my last little meditation before Mickey was sharing, is that we are also the patron saint for those expectant mothers. Now, there's something on our website that you might be very interested in for either you or someone you know. Is there's something called a St. Raymond Nonnatus kit, which comes with holy water and little rosary beads, prayer cards. Go to nonnatus.org, and under the St. Raymond Nonnatus kit will give you all the details to get the kit. Basically, what we do is we send it to you, actually our development office with our religious order, and there's a suggested donation of like maybe $25, whatever you can afford, because it is a donation, and that's just to help defray the cost of these kits. So please do spread the word about that as well. So Mickey, it's been wonderful to talk about St. Raymond Nonnatus on this podcast. Did you have anything else you wanted to share before we end?
I would just like to close out, just continue to pray to St. Raymond Nonnatus, ask for his intercession. And regardless, and also another thing too, especially if we have anyone who may be interested in joining the Catholic Church, which, never too late to consider, of course, or to return to the faith, start learning about the lives of the saints. And I can promise you, there may be someone that may jump out at you, regardless of what your circumstances are or what your occupation is. And let's face it, even St. John Paul the Great reminds us that everyone can be a saint. It's just not reserved. It's not only reserved for those who are, who are in the religious life or whatever, but anyone can be a saint. All that it takes is devoutness, determined, a persevering faith, but most importantly, denying yourselves and laying everything that's standing your way at the foot of the cross.
That's right. Just lay it before the cross, because that's where healing can be found. We're only human here. All of us are only human, right? But Christ is where you'll find that healing. And we do just like the Blessed Mother has done. We point to him. And in God's time, you'll find that healing. We are so honored to accompany you on your spiritual path of healing. So Mickey, again, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
God bless everyone. We'll see you next month for our series on the saints with the Families in Crisis series for the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. God bless.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. For more information about the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation, visit nonnatus.org or email director.srnf@gmail.com.
The Shroud of Turin is one of the most researched and studied relics in church history, and profoundly impacts many who encounter its mystery.
As a person of faith, looking at it through the eyes of faith, I don't think it can help but touch your heart.
Something that we can look on not only to bolster our faith in those moments of weakness, but also to deepen our faith and our appreciation, our intimacy with Christ.
Join Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry as they examine the science of the Shroud through the lens of faith.
Really interesting scientific information that we didn't know about, like the pollen from all the different regions of the world. As the shroud traveled around, it picked that up. Some of the mites, things like that was really interesting to me. I mean, this made you really want to believe it a lot more.
It's impressive. Like humanly, I don't think like that is another level of love. It's not and people like, oh, I love you, I'll give you a chocolate. No. I'm giving you more than my life. I'm giving you my suffering.
Asking both experts and disciples, who do you say I am?
As far as who the man of the shroud is, I, as a person of faith and kind of reviewing the evidence there, it seems that a convincing argument can be made that it's Jesus of Nazareth.
Visit patchworkheart.org/shroud to learn more and get exclusive behind-the-scenes updates for your support.